Ouch, that hurt. But that was fun. And also cool. Really cool. But just you wait until you see what else I added. Also, sorry for the 8-month wait period, but I'll tell you my excuse at the end of the video. And since we can't be wasting any more time, let me show you what I added in this devlog. I decided to start with the dialogue system first, since I needed this for the quest system, which I also made for today's devlog. And the dialogue system was super annoying to make. I can't explain how annoying it was to make it. It might look simple, but the code for it is just a mess. So of course, I started with a rough idea of how the dialogue box would look like. I forgot to record this process, but you can see here how it looks like. I know, it's real bad, but that's what concepts are for. Then I decided to code the part that decides when the dialogue should stop. I made it so that if you walk away, the dialogue stops, and if you die, the dialogue stops. And of course, I made the mandatory exit dialogue button, which does exactly what you think it does. It makes you subscribe and like the video. Well, if you haven't already done so. Anyways, the concept code was thankfully easy to make. Hopefully it won't backbite me later when I add more code to the dialogue system. Then I decided to make it so that the dialogue options are clickable. But of course, I had problems making this part due to my hideous code. Thankfully, it worked out in the end. Oh, and I forgot to mention by now that this dialogue system can have multiple options per dialogue. So like, if I wanted one NPC to give me the option to use 3 different shops, then I can do that. I think this might be a bit overkill though, since I could have definitely gotten away with a single option dialogue, but this is way cooler. Now here's the fun part that makes a dialogue come to life, and that is the typewriter effect. That's not right, but it's funny. It looks like the character is drunk. Okay, as I was saying, the part that makes a dialogue come to life is the typewriter effect. This was pretty simple to make, if you don't count the small bug I had beforehand. It's just a loop that writes the next letter of our dialogue every single frame, until it finishes writing the whole dialogue. But I had to make sure to match the speed at which the letters appear with your frame rate. Otherwise, you will get a slow dialogue if you have like 5 frames per second, or a really fast dialogue if you have 500 frames per second, and then... Anyways, that's basically it for the dialogue system. You might have also noticed that the buttons move in and out nicely when starting the dialogue, and yeah, that is something I've also made. And the moving dialogue was the super annoying part to make, since I had to make many different connections which I also need to disconnect under certain conditions. And those conditions have to be checked in a specific way so that the script doesn't break. And I think I could have fixed many of these problems by just making better code, unlike whatever I coded at the start of the video.
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
But the deed is already done, and I don't feel like rewriting it. Also, I made it so that if you click the dialogue while the NPC is talking, you can skip the dialogue. And that was also a pain to make. So yeah, those were the annoying parts that I had to deal with thanks to my code. And before I packed the dialogue system, I needed a decent sound for the typewriter effect. So I tested and tested. Okay, this one was more of a joke than a test, until I settled with this, which sounds pretty good. And then later, I added it to the main game and made a better looking GUI for the dialogue box. I think I might remake the dialogue system in the future, since currently it's a mess to deal with, and the code I wrote just looks so unclean. It really annoys me, but sadly it's gonna stay. So let's see what I made next. Alright, this one is my favorite so far. Reason being is that I made it so that you can track any stat in the game. I can track the basic stuff like damage dealt and damage taken, total amount of times I've attacked, and etc. But if I wanted, I can even make some super specific stats, like total amount of times I double jumped, total amount of times I started a quest, total amount of times I walked away while talking to a specific NPC, and etc. Only problem is that some of these stats, like total times I walked away from a dialogue, can be exploited. but those stats aren't that important, so it's not that big of a deal. So the reason why I even decided for the stat tracking system to be this detailed is because I couldn't think of any other way to make a stat tracking system. Well, at first, I didn't even think of making a stat tracking system. The first thing I wanted to make was actually the quest system, but the solution that came to mind was alright, I guess. It basically just gets your stat, like for example, use the tax, and increases your use the tax by 1 until you reach the amount the quest requires. But, seeing that this quest system basically has to go through a lot of different stats, I decided to also make a stat tracking system inside of the quest system and kill 2 birds with 1 stone. And on top of all that, I don't see many games that keep track of your stats, so that was another reason why I wanted to add the stat system to my game. The code for it is pretty ugly, but it's not that bad where it lags the whole server. And plus, it gets the job done, so I don't have to worry for now. But I'll definitely have to worry later, especially around saving the stats, because currently, stats take up a lot of memory. Like anywhere between 10 to 30 letters per stat, which is around 10 to 30 bytes per stat. Thankfully it's not that bad since data stores can save a lot of data, and I don't have many stats to save either way. But once I have way more stuff in my game, there will most likely be a problem, and then I'll have to learn to make a compression algorithm of some sorts and learn other ways to lower the data size. Maybe you guys could help with this. And if you want to help, then leave a comment down below, or even better, join my Discord server in the description below. It recently got an overhaul, so it's absolutely worth it joining it. Anyways, the code for it is pretty boring. It just goes through a couple of for loops and temporarily saves the stat on the server. In other words, it caches it on the server. And this is just so that I don't throttle the data store service. If I were to save it directly to the data store instead of caching it on the local server, the game would have so many data saving issues, nobody would play it then. And then when the player has to save his data, it uses the cache from before and saves it to the data store. Pretty basic stuff. And besides that, I also made it so that the corresponding stats are made into folders and attributes, which is stored under the player so that the player can see their stats without the need for me to constantly send data using remote events, which will just lag the game into oblivion. At least that's what I think. Unsure if this is a good tactic, but in my mind it seems like a reasonable way to reduce the network usage. Now finally it's time to show it in action. But before that, I of course had to make some ideas for how the stats system should look like. The first iteration I made was completely on my own, and I even stuck to this design since I was too lazy to check how other games made their stats system. My thought process was, game has many stats, game needs collapsible stats. So I did just that. It kinda turned out okay, but I'm not too happy with it. But it works fine, and it displays all the information you need, so it will stay like this. Just don't ask me how the code for this somewhat simple looking design looks like. You do not want to know. And of course, we can't forget the quest system because the stat tracking system wouldn't have existed otherwise. Anyways, the code for it is somewhat similar to the stat tracking system, going through a bunch of for loops and then adding some stats together. And additionally, it does the amazing quest stuff that everyone is familiar with, like gaining experience and cash after completing a quest, showing what you have to do for each quest. I mean, I don't really have to explain this since you probably know how quests work. You've seen them thousands of times. So instead, I'll just show you the design. And in my opinion, they look pretty darn cool. Just don't ask for the man versus machine quest, and definitely don't try to complete it because the dummy is stupidly hard to beat and the reward that you get is not good at all. Anyways, let's see what I cooked up next. Now, the star of the show, the highlight of the video, the main course of the meal. This is probably the most fun and the most pain I've had making a character. But at least it's the best quality character out of the other 3 characters, so I'm proud of that. And I simply had to make it better quality because I wanted to make a higher quality devlog. And it just feels stupid not trying to push my limits with each devlog. Now that we are on the 7th devlog, I kinda figured that it's nice to try and become better and better in each video. You guys get absolute fire content, and I get increased skill, and maybe even some money! To me, that sounds like a win-win situation. Anyways, besides it being fun scripting Guts, it was also funny while scripting Guts. Like, literally in the first few days of scripting him, I already encountered a problem with setting up the Dragon Slayer on your back when you spawn in. I assumed that I did absolutely everything right, since the values I used were tested on a regular dummy beforehand. But no, Roblox Studio decided that I was wrong. Either way, I fixed it by just using the C1 value instead of the C0 value, which still doesn't make sense, but alright Roblox Studio, you do you. And since I fixed that Dragon Slayer issue way later, in the meantime, I decided to improve my VFX skills by making a new place just for VFX. Okay, the new place is not really new since you saw this in the previous devlog, but today I improved the place so that I can actually have decent textures to work with. So of course, I had to begin my VFX journey by borrowing assets which I can use for practice. I even came up with a pretty cool idea that should be legal since I'm using free-to-use models. I have no idea how I did not come up with this idea earlier, but since I'm mostly a scripter, I can insert as many models as I want, then write some handy-dandy code that will help me extract all the particle textures, and boom, I got myself over 1,000 particles, just like that. Although there are a lot of duplicate textures, so overall I'm left with way less particles. But I decided that that was not enough, especially after seeing that most of these particles completely suck. Like, what even is this supposed to be? And there are just too many specific and colored particles, which make the amount of usable particles even lower. And so I went on YouTube in search of finding even more particles. I'll spare you the hassle of explaining the adventure, but basically I found and joined Raw VFX and found some really good free-to-use particles in there. Like, insanely good. And of course, I stole some of them and added it to the collection. Legally, of course. Then I spent a long time sorting the particles, and in the end, I gave up. It was just exhausting trying to sort these hideous, unnameable particles, and decided it wasn't worth sinking any more time into this. And then I decided to release the particle pack to the public for absolutely free. Wait, what? When did I add this to the script? Okay, anyways, I did release it to the public for absolutely free so that everyone can use it. I kinda hate myself for making this pack due to the fact that it took ages to make, and due to the fact that it's boring moving the camera from and to the particle pack, then selecting the particle texture, then copying the ID and repeat. But I had to do what I had to do, and that is to make a better VFX for new abilities. But I wish I made this into a plugin, since in my mind that seems even compacter and even more practical. So if you want me to actually make that, then leave a comment down below and leave a like just so I know you guys want that in the future. And while you're down there, I left a link for the pack in the description if you want to check the pack for yourself. Also, if I accidentally stole any one of your particles, then DM me on Discord so that I can remove the said particle from the pack. Oh wow, I couldn't have asked for a better timing. This is gonna come in real handy. Anyways, I forgot to tell you guys that these two absolute legends helped me in making this ability. And I'm only mentioning this because, well, first of all, they helped me, and second of all, these models are insanely good. So, if you join the Discord server, then make sure to thank them for these amazing models. Now, back to VFX. Using my new awesome pack, I made all the VFX for Guts, which turned out pretty cool. Well, at least better than any of my previous effects. The first VFX I made was the hand cannon shot VFX. Wow, that's a mouthful. Which I think turned out the best out of all the other effects. I wish I was a professional so I could make even better VFX, but wishful thinking will get me nowhere. Maybe I'll challenge myself to become the best VFX artist in 30 days. Anyways, the next thing I made was the VFX for the arrow. It wasn't anything complicated since, well, you can't really complicate an arrow effect. In my case, I just added a trail and that's it. Next, I made bomb explosion VFX, which turned out really good. I even added a little sizzle effect on the fuses, just for more detail. Next up were the swings, which turned out decent. And lastly, the Berserker armor. This one was fun to work with, and even more so while scripting. The effect for the armor is pretty basic. I mean, it's literally just two beams attached to the eyes of the armor. Literally one of the easiest things someone could do. At least the beams look cool, but there's another effect that I used alongside with the armor, and that's the blood effect. Some of you probably already know why I need this, and some maybe even expected this from me, but just in case, I'll explain later why I needed the blood effect. So let's not waste a single second and let's start with the important stuff, and those are the attacks. Now, making them was a pain, since I had to challenge myself and make not one, but two different attacks, which was not fun to do. Thankfully, it wasn't that bad, but after those, I had to make another 5 attacks. Well, it's more like modifying 5 previous attacks, but we don't talk about that. So in total, 7 attacks, and one of them is a power-up. Anyways, the first thing I made was a cool little move called Bomb. Actually, I made the skill tree first. And I had to make it first because I have to keep buying the attacks somehow. After that, I made the bomb throw attack, which is kinda weak, but it's really cool. It's more of a stun move than an attack move. Just don't ask how many problems I had while making this. Next thing I made was the arrow shot thing. Yeah, I know, amazing name. Don't worry though, it's not named like that in game. So I started working on that, which was not so simple. For some reason, I was getting the calculations of the C-frames completely wrong, and so these arrows, if you can even call them that, were not traveling properly. I don't know why C-frames are so hard to get right, but it managed to get it to work. And this is just a range attack, which is pretty easy to dodge. Now, the next thing I made was the hand cannon, which was pretty easy. Only extra work I had to do was make it so that it flings you if you get hit. And as you can see, it does hefty damage. And it stops your attacks. Then I started on one of the 3 swings. First one was the charge swing, which was also just a copy-paste move. Only extra thing I had to do was make it knock back the opponent, and also fix the knockback because I didn't get it right the first time. Next was the swing barrage, a high attack barrage that does insane damage if the attacks hit your opponent, because it's stupidly easy to dodge. And lastly was the overhead swing, which was also simple to make, except the effect, which was a bit tricky to do. And now the main part of the ability, Berserker mode. If you know about the Berserker armor, you probably know how overpowered it is, and because I like keeping things real, I also made it overpowered. So once you go Berserk, you don't get stunned as often, you do more damage, you attack faster, and you walk faster. But those who know that you can't just have all of these benefits for free. So each time you use one of your attacks, you take damage. And you remember the blood effect from earlier? Well, this is where I'm gonna use it. And also, you can only use the attacks that come with the Guts ability. Well, some of them. Let me just show you how overpowered it is. What? Oh, come on. Man, I should actually balance the game. I'd also like you to test it out for yourself by playing the game. So, have fun. But it's not the end of the video, so stay with me for a little while more, because I also want to show you another new system and some other additions that I added to the game. So let's see what I made next. Okay, this one was pretty simple to do, despite it sounding a bit scary. Not only is such a system basically in almost every game, I had to make it since it's going to make my job easier in the future, considering the fact on what kind of game I'm working on. The code for it is super simple and nothing over the top. It's just a table with information about each NPC, like health amount, drop chances, EXP gain, and etc. And then another script uses that information to spawn the NPCs and calculate what rewards to give when you kill an NPC. Super simple stuff. And after testing it with the new item and EXP dummies and seeing it work fine, I added 2 more NPCs to the game, the noob and the thug. I didn't want to add more since I didn't know what to add, And plus, the current AI for all NPCs is the same, which is the attacking dummy AI. And if you know the attacking dummy, you know how brutal he is. So in the future, I'll have to remake the AI and make it dynamic so that the difficulty of the AI depends on certain factors and isn't just a fixed difficulty. And since that's all for this chapter, let's see what's next. Okay, finally some quality of life stuff. It's not much, but it's honest work. Anyways, the first thing I added was a cooldown resetter next to the other admin blocks because honestly, it's a pain having to change the cooldown values to 0, then launch the game, and then change the cooldowns back to the original value and repeat the process if I want to test something with the move again. So I made a block to reset my cooldowns, which means it's perfect for when I test the game. And it's also perfect for you guys since the game is in a testing phase and anyone can play the game. Which means you can help find bugs in the game. And it means a lot to me when you guys send the feedback, either it be through comments or Discord. Okay, now let's get back on track. Next quality of life thing was making the bags a little bit more lively. By that I mean I made them spin and added a bit of effect so that it looks nicer. Of course, I somehow had problems making this, which shouldn't have happened since it's relatively simple. But then again, I'm not using tweens to rotate the bag, even though I probably should. But after the problems were assessed, it turned out pretty cool. And I added more smaller changes and additions which you will have to check out for yourself, or check it out in the Discord server below. And that brings us to the last and most important thing. Okay, let me explain why it took so long to make just one devlog. You definitely won't be happy with the answer, but I'm only human after all. So first of all, I don't have a single excuse to give you guys because it really boils down to me not putting in the effort to make the video. I could say I was busy with school and other things, which is absolutely true, but I still had time to at least make 1% of the video each day. Okay, maybe a little less because I have to code first and then make the video, but you get the point. And another thing I want to mention is that the ambition I had when making the first devlog was super high. Now it has drastically decreased, to the point that I don't really like making these videos. And to add salt to the wound, YouTube doesn't even monetize me anymore, which actually helped me stay motivated and make videos a bit faster. Even though I didn't make much from monetization, waking up and seeing that I made money thanks to me putting in effort in these videos and the game motivated me. And not to sound greedy or anything, but I made this channel so that I could hopefully make enough cash to be able to live and just do the things I love. That is, of course, when I start living independently, since I'm still with my parents. And so, if you want to support me in any way possible, you can buy some of the game passes in my game. And because I know spending money on a random stranger is not fun in the slightest bit, I'd rather want you guys to just like, comment, subscribe and share the video so that YouTube recommends the video to more people. And if more people subscribe to this channel, I will be able to make a more variety of videos. Well, it's probably going to be something game related, but still, if we get a bigger community, I could definitely continue with this channel. And that's it for today. See you guys hopefully very soon.